Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Terzian, and I am so thrilled and honored to host this live Instagram studio visit with artist Jennifer Abbott-Tillou. She will be joining us shortly from her studio in Torrington. I had the great pleasure of seeing her work in person last week, and I was just blown away. As you'll see once we get started here, the just personal narrative that is associated with Jen's work and the found objects that she incorporates and is truly incredible. So I am just so excited to share this work with you, and this is our first time with the Oliver Wolcott Library live Instagram. So anniversary. There we are. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Jen. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Very pleased that we're doing this today. I'm grateful.
I'm so excited to share all of your beautiful work and your story with all of the members of our community here joining us. So let's get started. Let's first just hear a little bit about your background and just how you got started as an artist.
Well, a lot of you know I kind of started out in the world of science. I went to college in the 80s for physical therapy. My mom and dad were both, my dad was a doctor and my mom was a physical therapist. And kind of in 8th grade, I wrote my career paper on being a physical therapist, and it kind of turned into reality. But I was always kind of a creative soul, and just kind of found ways to keep creating even though that wasn't my day job. And so in 1990, I can't really tell you why, I created my first sculpture out of a copper tube and some cedar wood that we found in the backyard here in Litchfield, Connecticut. So I put that together and kind of never stopped since then. So in 1990, I had my first job in physical therapy, and I lived in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I had this little closet space / stairway that went up into an attic in my apartment. And that's where I did my work. It was maybe, like 4 by 6 or something. But I've always since then kind of kept a sacred space where I could keep creating. So kind of started in the 90s, in my mid-20s, with copper tubing and making mobiles. So I made little schools of fiction. In fact, there's actually one that I'm staring at right there, a newer take on that. But yeah, and then I started kind of working with driftwood and merging the copper and the driftwood, and things just kind of kept morphing. I made some moves, and I always kept space. My space was in the upstairs of a barn in Newton, Massachusetts. And then in 2009, when I moved back to Litchfield, I rented space at the Switch Factory. So I had this beautiful studio space there with the river behind me, and just kind of continued with everything from old doors that people would drop off for me to found objects, chains, started working more with kind of metals and old tools, and kind of kept that path towards creating space, creating time, and now I'm so happy to be here in Torrington at my Gallery 7 studio. Yeah.
Wonderful. I love it. And I'm so thrilled that you get to show off your beautiful studio space. It's really extraordinary. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the comment section right now just so that we can have a full view of the artwork. So once we're finished with the tour portion, I will turn the comments back on, and feel free to ask questions at that time. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And here we go. So we're going to start with the studio tour here, and Jen's going to walk us through and pause with certain pieces that she'd like to talk more about. So we can start with whatever work you want to begin with.
So here we are in my hallway in Torrington, 79 Main Street, right across from the Warner. I have this wonderful kind of corner space that I inhabit and have kind of overtaken. We'll kind of start with this piece right here. It's called She Runs. I made it I finished a lot of work recently. This is one of the pieces that has been in progress for maybe a year or so. It's very abstract. It's a representation of, a female figure running with her powerful, strong body and her hair flowing behind her, an arrow or a spear pointing her in the right direction as she runs powerfully from a little bit of persecution, a little bit of violence. So we'll kind of come on along, and this is some old work. This is kind of, I went through a little phase where I was working with bright acrylics. So when I talk about juxtaposition, I kind of can go from these bright, very modern materials to these kind of rusty industrial materials. Right now, I'm kind of sticking with this phase of working with chains and found object, etc. So we'll come on in to Gallery 7. Follow me.
And Jen, if you could just speak about sort of the sourcing of your objects. I'm so curious to know more about sort of like how this all happens, where you find the pieces. I know that oftentimes people give you things to work with, friends and family. So there's that personal connection. If you could just, talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, I would say probably 80% of what I work with is a found object. It's either a piece of driftwood, it's a rusty metal box that I find behind one of these buildings here in Torrington. I have a lot of things that I find from my mom and dad's backyard in Litchfield. They have an old house and an old barn, and it's amazing how many wonderful things you can find in old houses and old farms. I have friends who just drop things off at my studio. A lot of friends who do that, gardeners especially, wink, wink. Let's see, what else? Skulls, lots of skulls that are found in the backyard. My mom and dad live in a beautiful property in Litchfield, Connecticut, where I grew up, and still have the great gift and pleasure of returning to. There's a bottle dump there, which kind of turns itself over every 10 years or so. This happens to be a year where when I go down there, my feet are crunching on all this old, it's just metal, tin, chains, old bottles. So that's another source. It's kind of an infinite and never-ending source.
So would you say that your work sort of originates with the material that you find and then the art comes after that, or are you going into sort of looking at things with already an idea behind it?
Let's collect here, maybe this is a good place.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
this here, it's called August's Men's Shop. So my mother's dad, Grandpa Augie, owned a men's clothing store in Utica, New York. And so this structure here, what has been kicking around in the barn at my mom and dad's house for decades and decades and decades. So when they tried to clear, they were getting rid of things. And I saw this just so beautifully sculptural. It's hard to kind of find the shadow right now because I have a huge skylight right here. But the shadow is amazing on this frame. So I knew that was going to be something that I wanted to incorporate. It's called August's Men's Shop. So this I had around for a while, and then I thought, I like to juxtapose things. So I envisioned kind of putting this glitter glass with this diamond dust on it to make it really glitter in the light, which it does. Again, you probably can't see that right now. But still didn't know quite what to do. And then in a junk shop in Goshen, I found this case of these old amazing light bulbs. And so just kind of, they came together in this form to create this piece. And I love it. I love the shadow because the shadow is so geometric, and also the bulbs are so round to the square of the structure. So I haven't figured out whether it's going to hang and spin, which of course it can. But I'm also thinking about maybe putting it into a really big chunk of beautiful wood, kind of rough hewn, like an old beam, kind of setting it in to make it a little more stable. I've thought about uplighting it, which would make amazing shadow. It's kind of a work in progress. But so that's an example, something from my mom's farm, something from a junk shop, and then something really glittery and sparkly.
Right.
So that would be the shop. And then on this wall, you can kind of see very kind of more of the same. Everything on this wall, actually, I didn't really notice this until just this second, but everything on this wall has something from my mom and dad's farm. So this was out in their backyard near their chicken coop, this door. There's this beautiful blue patina, weathered. It's so unique because of its, its skinny size. And I just found that so sculptural on its own.
Right.
And then the lucite of the, pitchfork and the straw represented in these lucite bars. And even the way that the wood looks through the lucite.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's amazing.
I just love the way these crazy things come together in such an interesting way.
Absolutely. It's so fascinating that you're able to envision this working together. It all works. It really does. And it all plays a, pivotal role within the work. And I just love too, the strength and power behind your work as well.
Thank you. Thank you. This next piece here, this is called A Woman's Journey. It speaks to all women. Again, this was found on the beach in Brewster, Massachusetts. This is an old vintage ice tong, again, found in my parents' barn. So their property abuts the Bantam River, which, and has an ice house on the property. And these tongs were used to, pick up the ice from the Bantam River and stack it in their ice house back in the day. So this piece, I had found these 3 pieces. They've been sitting around for I don't know how long, but I have a lovely friend who's had a very serious struggle with breast cancer and reconstruction and just trying to struggle through physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all of it. Yeah. And so I felt like this represented that female form and what women kind of go through when they go on that journey. So kind of that juxtaposition of the intensity of the ice tongs, and they almost form that female corset, and then this one breast that is almost exaggerated and appeals to the media image of what a woman should look like, and then just the lack. So a woman's journey, and my intention is just to support all women, all people, and just to maybe connect with each other's experience in a way that hopefully kind of lifts people up.
Beautiful.
So and objects that stick around and then just come together. So when you go into my studio, you'll see kind of all my piles of stuff that I have to work with. So that's kind of how those things come together.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And then on a lighter note, this is a more recent work. It's called Alive in Teatown. So Alive in Torrington. And I wanted to kind of capture spirit and vitality and aliveness. I love globes. I love geometric shapes. So, the round globes, the square boxes, etc. But this was just about energy, life, seeing things from a different perspective. In this piece, I definitely was kind of thinking about just making something that kind of looks pretty and kind of looked cool. I asked my good friend and beautiful artist, Richard Hayes, to help me create this vase, this beautiful burl vase. And this is, I think it's like a car wheel thing, a rotor maybe. And this was the first piece that came in, was this piece. I saw these chunks here, and I thought about how cool a shadow would look coming through that. And when this is lit correctly, you have a shadow that goes like this on the wall with all squares. So there's a square shadow that goes about 3 feet, depending on how you light it, from these little square pieces. It also comes out of the bowl. And then obviously, depending on how you light it, it will light up your wall or your ceiling, or your floor, depending on how it's lit. So this piece is, I love it just because it's exciting and it has so many different ways that it can be lit and set. So these kind of can move. So you can do
Okay.
and you could, even if you needed to put it against the wall, kind of move them all forward and tuck it in a little bit. And there's also a way to light it from within. So we are live Torrington people.
I love it. So dynamic. Very cool.
Thank you. And then the last kind of piece that I can talk about here, unless there are questions before we go into the studio, is this piece that I made it for myself. And it's called Ode to Me. And it's a good example of when I come to the studio and I do something simply for the joy of creating. So it's a collage. And I had never made a collage before. I don't know if I did it right or not, but I absolutely love it. So it probably has maybe 6 or 7 layers that I would just leave it on the floor, and I would, take old photos or images that I loved or colors that I loved, incorporating the most important people in my life in one way or another. I started actually with writing words about myself that I love, things that I love about myself that I want to continue to nurture and acknowledge and honor.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so it was really kind of like a labor of love, and it's meant to go in my office at home. But it's kind of, a lot of times the work that I do is just something that makes me feel good. So this was kind of something that I kind of did in the middle of trying to produce something, was just to kind of have that out where I could work things out and be unattached to outcome, which is one of my mantras. So that's a collage. I loved doing it so much that I think it would be a nice gift to give people. So I could see kind of, doing it on commission, or having, for one of my girlfriends, for her birthday, having all the girls, take something and incorporate it into this amazing collage that someone could kind of live with. A lot of energy and good juju will feed their voice.
Yeah, such a great idea. I love that. Jen, how long did that take you, that work? How long did that take you to complete?
I would say from start to finish, maybe 6 weeks or so. I didn't work on it a lot. I would maybe work on it once or twice a week.
Okay.
And so I found the board, of course. I found the board in either my backyard or somebody's backyard. I think it's 2 by 4, 2 feet by 4 feet. And just put had some cracks. So I put some stays on it, which I love because I think everything, that's broken can be fixed. And it looks more beautiful. It's like a scar or a stitch. So they just kept putting layers on, adding this, adding that. And I knew kind of some of the things that I really wanted to pop through on the last layer. So there's work from other people in there, people who came, wonderful artists, you know who you are, who came here and just worked on the floor on their own work and didn't know that I was going to chop up their work and put it in there.
How interesting.
Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks, but I mean, not that many hours.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's kind of like a little selection of some of the work that's out here.
Yeah.
Should we go into the studio?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll come on in here. So this is where I'm supposed to do most of the work in here. I definitely end up morphing outwards. As much space as you'll give me, I'll take when it comes to the artwork. But so this is kind of my studio space. This is a piece that is just hanging here because it's huge and it doesn't really have a place to live. But yeah, so you can I'll kind of show you, maybe like pan around this whole thing. Just kind of have a ton of supplies here. My pile of copper and industrial wire and barbed wire, all kinds of metal.
Wow.
Here. Yeah. So a little pile of eggs. Watch out for that. Lots of stuff on the floor.
I love it.
So this is all just, oh, you can go in pressures.
God,
That's
so much to work.
That's the view. Yeah, there's a lot of fodder.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and then this whole, it's just all, some are just finished works. I have lots of space to hang things. This is my kind of homemade sawhorse desk. This again, a big old board from my mom and dad's backyard. And then if you look here, this is just, again, so last year when my mom and dad cleaned out their barn, I just have such amazing things. I have, boxes of chain. I have all kinds of amazing things that I can just kind of pull out and work with. Nothing really to get bored about here. So, yeah. That's good. So I came across when I was trying to clean up a little bit here. I came across this pile and I was going to kind of clear it, but